Hey everybody, Dr. Sanderson here. Welcome to Unit 2, where we're going to be talking about sports media and social media and some of the effects that we're seeing in that area. So really there's kind of two main tracks here. There's the effect of social media for sports reporters and sports journalists in terms of their work routine and how they, do their job and how it's kind of changed the industry. And then also in terms on the flip side of that, we're looking at broadcast. So how has social media kind of influenced sports broadcasting? So let's look at with sports reporters. So a couple things just to keep in mind, and for those of you who maybe you follow sports media people or sports reporters on social media, you'll kind of be familiar with some of this. But as we know, social media is now a big thing for news. So when people want news, where do they go? They go to social media, usually Twitter, to see what's happening, and that's very true in sports. So sports news breaks on Twitter, and as a result, if you talk to people who work in sports media, they'll tell you they're pretty much always on Twitter and always tied to their phone to make sure they don't miss something and they're getting information out quickly. So it's kind of changed their work routine in the sense that they're very tied to mobile now, very tied to social media for news. Now, there's also been some issues with kind of professional standards as well. So, if you've seen a reporter tweet something out and then they say, and it was first reported by so and so, they're giving credit to the person who first broke the story. That didn't always happen. So you had reporters who would kind of, if you were to just read their tweet, you would think they were the ones breaking the story, when in fact they were not. So there's kind of some conflict and some back and forth between reporters, and so the industry is still kind of, I think, is trying to sort some things out in terms of how do the standards that we have for print, for broadcast, how do we then apply those to social media? And one example of that is sourcing. So, for example, is an athlete's social media content a source? And if you've read sports stories, you'll see that they often use athletes' tweets or athletes' Instagram posts in stories. Now, there's some athletes, and I've talked to some who don't like that. They understand that their content is public nature or public forum, so they understand they can't really do anything about it, but it does kind of lead to some conflict between them and sports journalists in the sense that journalists don't ask for permission to use their Facebook post, their tweet, their Instagram post, whatever. Some other things we're seeing there are just, we're seeing sports reporters be more vocal in terms of their personal views. So we're seeing a lot of sports reporters and journalists talk about political things, which has kind of led to some conflict. And in fact, some of you may have followed the story where ESPN just went through a pretty massive round of layoffs. And one of the reasons that people suggested those layoffs occurred was because the audience was tired of the reporters and the journalists being political. Now, I mean, there's other reasons for that, for the layoffs that have been advanced, but just something to kind of keep an eye on there as well. Okay, so then in terms of broadcast, we're seeing, a lot of sporting events now be streamed through our phone, through Twitter, Facebook Live, and even Periscope. So, we're really seeing a shift and change in how we watch things, as you all probably know. Very few people are watching live TV anymore. Sports has kind of often been immune to that, but now we're seeing people, really want sports content on their mobile device and tablets. So as a result, Twitter, they just announced that they're really going to start focusing on sports in their live streaming and really almost operate as a TV channel of sorts. Um, and then just a couple other quick things here that we'll talk about in this unit are now that sports organizations have the ability to generate their own media through their website and social media platforms, we're seeing some competition or conflict between the sports organization and reporters, particularly at the intercollegiate level. So, for example, if you're Arizona State, do you need the Arizona Republic to get your story out because you've got social media, you've got your website, and you can do video and tell all these stories, so you can get your story out to the audience you're trying to reach without, the mainstream media. Now, there's certainly stories that sports organizations are not going to tell. They're not going to report on corruption within the organization and things. So we clearly still need that external eye there. But it is kind of interesting to see the conflict that's happening as some sports organizations are limiting access to reporters and not giving them certain stories that they used to give them in the past because the sports organization is now telling that story. And then lastly, and this will be something you take up in the discussion forum, you know, social media is a place where a lot of harassment occurs for sports journalists, in particular female and women in sports media and sports journalism. So you'll read some articles and about these different kind of things that they encounter there, some of which I'll just warn you are very, you know, probably offensive and highly problematic. But I'm really looking forward to seeing what you say in the discussion forum about that. So your initial post in the discussion forum will be due by Saturday, and your 2 response posts will be due by Monday. And then just a reminder that if you're a graduate student, and this is only for graduate students, you need to submit your the topic that you're going to use for your research paper by the end of Unit 2. So by Monday, you need to make sure that you have submitted through the Blackboard, you know, just a brief, maybe 2, 3, 4 sentence rationale of the topic you're going to use for the final paper. So that's sport and social media. I'm looking forward to our conversations, and please let me know if you have any questions.